The station shook so hard that my teeth rattled inside my jaw, and the lights over my head cracked from white to a dying orange. Somewhere below my feet, metal screamed. I am Ilyana Vosh, Chief Fabrication Engineer of the Kryvaen science vessel Halvan Ren, and in that moment, I understood, for the first time in my long career, that my knowledge might not be enough to save the people around me. 3 minutes earlier, I had been laughing. We were docked at a joint research outpost near a dying star, a strange, dim red thing that pulsed like a tired heart. My people and the humans of the ship Meridian had built this outpost together, a rare gesture of cooperation between two very different worlds. I had come to oversee the technical side of things, confident, as always, that Kryvaen science stood above all others. We do not build with our hands, we grow our machines from pure information, using assemblers that shape matter atom by atom, guided by flawless code. It is elegant. It is precise. It is, I believed, unmatched. So when I saw a human engineer named Callum Ferris, kneeling on the deck with a metal case full of hand tools, sorting through wrenches and screwdrivers, like a child playing with toys, I could not stop myself. I laughed, right there in front of him, a short, sharp sound that echoed down the corridor. "You still use these?" I asked, picking up a wrench and turning it over in my fingers. Metal sticks, turned by hand, on a station holding a joint research reactor. Callum did not look offended. He simply smiled, a tired, patient smile, and said, "Sticks that always work, even when the fancy stuff doesn't." I did not understand what he meant, not yet. The alarm began less than a minute later. A deep groan rolled through the station, then a screech of tearing metal, and every warning light on the wall turned red at once. My comm device buzzed against my wrist. "Gravitic stabilizer failure," said the calm, mechanical voice of the station's monitoring core. "Structural integrity falling. Time to critical collapse. 2 hours, 14 minutes. 2 hours. That was all we had before the station would be torn apart by the uneven gravity of the dead star outside, ripped into pieces along with everyone inside it. I ran. The central engineering bay was already full of noise and motion by the time I arrived. Kryvaen scientists were huddled around a floating display, arguing in fast bursts of our language, while sparks fell from a cracked panel above the main stabilizer core. I pushed through them to see the damage myself, and what I saw made my heart sink. The gravitic stabilizer, the machine responsible for keeping the station's structure balanced against the crushing pull of the star, had been struck by a chunk of debris during the last tremor. Its housing was bent, one whole side crushed inward, wires exposed and sparking, metal twisted in ways no clean diagram could ever predict. "Deploy the assemblers," ordered Director Semra Voss, our mission leader, her voice tight with controlled panic. "Full swarm. Rebuild it now." I did not hesitate. I opened my control pad and released a cloud of nano-assemblers, tiny machines that could build almost anything, as long as they had a clean pattern to follow. They swarmed over the broken stabilizer like a silver mist, scanning, searching, trying to find a baseline shape to replicate. They found nothing. "Pattern not recognized," the assemblers reported, their voices layering together into one flat tone. "Structural damage exceeds acceptable deviation. Unable to proceed." I tried again, feeding them backup schematics, forcing them to ignore the damage and build straight from the original design. The assemblers began to work, laying down fresh material over the twisted housing, but within seconds, the new material cracked and flaked away, unable to bond properly to the warped metal beneath it. "It is not working," I said, my voice rising despite myself. "The base structure is too irregular. The assemblers need a stable surface to build from, and there is none." Director Voss turned to me with sharp, urgent eyes. "Then make one." "I cannot make what does not exist," I snapped back, frustration burning in my chest. "Our tools are built to create from a clean pattern. They do not know how to fix something broken. They only know how to build something new." The station shook again, harder this time, and a support beam above us bent with a low groan. Somewhere far off I heard a scream, quickly cut short. That was when Callum Ferris walked into the bay, carrying his metal case of tools, followed by 2 more humans I did not yet know by name. "We heard the alarm," he said simply. "Figured you might want some hands." I almost laughed again, out of pure disbelief, but the sound caught in my throat. There was no room left for pride, not with the clock ticking down behind us. "This is a precision failure," I told him, gesturing at the ruined stabilizer. "It requires molecular repair, not hand tools." Callum crouched beside the machine, running his fingers gently along the crushed housing, feeling the shape of the damage, the way a doctor might feel a wound. "Looks to me like it just needs to be put back into shape first," he said. "Then maybe your fancy stuff can finish the job." "Put back into shape," I repeated, the words feeling strange in my mouth. "You mean bend it, by hand? That's usually how it starts." "Yeah," he said, and pulled a heavy metal bar from his case. Director Voss looked at me, silently asking whether this was worth allowing. I did not know the answer, but we had 1 hour and 50 minutes left, and no better plan of our own. "Let them try," I said quietly. "We have nothing to lose but time. We were already losing." What happened next stayed burned into my memory for the rest of my life. Callum did not consult any database. He did not run a diagnostic scan or request a clean pattern. He simply looked at the crushed housing, tapped it twice with his knuckles, and began to work. He wedged the metal bar into the bent section and pulled with his whole body, muscles straining, sweat forming on his brow, until the metal groaned and slowly bent back toward its original shape. It was not perfect. It was not precise to the smallest measurement, the way my assemblers demanded, but it was close, close enough. "Now your machines might have something to work with," he said, breathing hard. I stared at the bent metal, my mind racing to understand what I had just witnessed. My people had spent thousands of years building tools that required perfection to function, tools that could create astonishing things from nothing, but that shattered the moment reality became messy or uneven. Callum's tools required no such perfection. A wrench did not care if the bolt beneath it was scratched or slightly warped. A metal bar did not refuse to bend crushed steel, simply because the steel was not exactly as it should be. "Try the assemblers again," Director Voss said to me. My hands trembled slightly as I released the swarm once more. The tiny machines settled over the roughly repaired housing, scanning, calculating. "Partial pattern match found," they reported. "Beginning limited reconstruction." It was working. Not fully, not cleanly, but it was working. "We need more time on the internal wiring," said one of the other humans, a woman named Fiona Marsh, already pulling burnt wires free from the housing with a small pair of cutters. "These connectors are fried. I can splice new ones, but it will take hands, not code." "Do it," Director Voss said, and for the first time since I had known her, I heard something close to hope in her voice. I found myself kneeling beside Fiona, watching her work. Her hands moved quickly, stripping insulation from wire ends, twisting them together with practiced skill, wrapping each connection in a strip of dark tape. "What is that material?" I asked, pointing at the tape. "Duct tape," she said, not even looking up. "Fixes almost anything, for long enough to matter." "It cannot possibly hold under this much stress," I said. "It doesn't need to hold forever," she replied. "It just needs to hold until we're not about to die." There was a strange wisdom in that answer that I could not immediately dismiss. For the next half hour, I worked alongside them, no longer laughing, no longer certain of anything, except that we were running out of time. I held wires steady while Fiona spliced them. I passed tools to Callum as he called for them, learning the names quickly. Wrench, pliers, cutter, brace. Each word felt foreign on my tongue, yet each tool did exactly what its name promised, simple and direct. 90 minutes remaining, the station's voice announced, flat and unfeeling. The wiring was patched, the housing was roughly reshaped, but the stabilizer's core alignment was still off, and without perfect alignment, the machine would tear itself apart the moment we tried to bring it back online. "We need a support structure," Callum said, stepping back to study the machine. "Something to hold the core steady while it powers back up. Otherwise the vibration will shake it apart again in seconds." "We have no spare housing of the correct shape," I said. "Our assemblers can print one, but it would take at least 40 minutes to grow, and even then, it might not fit an irregular repair like this." Callum looked around the bay, his eyes scanning the walls, the floor, the broken pieces of debris scattered from the earlier collision. Then his gaze settled on a length of curved hull plating that had been torn loose during the first tremor. "That'll do," he said. "That is not designed for this purpose," I said. "It is structural plating, not a precision brace." "Doesn't need to be precision," he said, already lifting the heavy plate with help from the third human, a quiet young man named Owen Blake. "It just needs to hold shape under pressure. We'll bend it, bolt it, and let your assemblers reinforce the surface once it's in place." I watched them wrestle the curved plate into position around the stabilizer core, bolting it at several points with tools from Callum's case, tightening each bolt by hand with a strength and patience that seemed endless. It was crude. It was, by every standard I had been taught, an insult to good engineering. And yet, as I studied the shape they had created, an idea began to form in my mind. "Wait," I said, stepping forward. "If I apply a molecular reinforcement layer across the surface of your brace, binding the metal at an atomic level, it could add the structural strength that hand tools alone cannot provide." I directed the assembler swarm to spread across the newly formed brace, weaving a thin, invisible layer of reinforced material into the metal itself, strengthening every joint the humans had created by hand. It was strange, working this way, blending careful human effort with precise machine correction. Neither method alone would have been enough. Together, they became something new. 70 minutes remaining. Sweat had formed on my brow now too, a strange human sensation that I had never before experienced in my sealed environmental suit, made possible only because I had removed my helmet in the heat of the work, forgetting caution entirely. Around me, humans and Kryvaen worked side by side, no longer divided by pride or difference, simply focused on the single goal of staying alive. "Core alignment reading," Director Voss called out, watching the display above the stabilizer. "It is holding steady, barely, but steady." "We are not done," I said, wiping my brow. "The power core still needs to be brought back online, and if the surge is too sudden, it could shatter the very repairs we just made." "Then we bring it online slowly," Callum said. "Step by step. Watch it the whole way." "Our systems are not designed for gradual manual activation," I said. "They are designed for instant, calculated startup." "Then today, they get redesigned," he said, already moving toward the control panel. Together, we worked out a new procedure, one that had never existed before in either of our cultures. I used my control pad to monitor the internal structure of the stabilizer at the smallest scale, watching for any sign of stress or fracture, while Callum and Fiona manually adjusted the physical power flow through a series of valves and switches, feeding energy into the system in careful, measured amounts rather than a single overwhelming surge. 10% power, Fiona said, her hand steady on the control lever. "Structure holding," I reported, watching the readings on my pad. 20%. Holding. Each increase brought a fresh wave of tension into the room, every person watching the trembling readouts, waiting for the moment everything might fall apart. I found myself holding my breath, a habit I had picked up from watching the humans around me, though my lungs did not require the pause the way theirs did. 50% power. A faint tremor ran through the floor, and for one terrible second, I thought the brace would fail. But the readings held steady, the reinforced metal absorbing the stress exactly as I had hoped. 30 minutes remaining, the station's voice announced. 70% power, Fiona called, sweat now dripping from her chin. The lights around us flickered, then steadied. The deep groan of stressed metal faded into something quieter, a low hum instead of a scream. 90% power. I watched the display with every sense fully focused, searching for even the smallest sign of failure. There was none. The stabilizer's core spun steadily now, its rhythm smooth, its alignment true. "Full power," Fiona said, pushing the final lever into place. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the trembling in the floor stopped completely. The alarms fell silent, one by one, until the only sound left in the bay was the quiet hum of a machine, working exactly as it should. "Structural integrity restored," the station's voice announced. "Collapse threat neutralized." A cheer broke out among the humans, loud and joyful, arms raised, hands slapping against shoulders, in a gesture I did not fully understand, but somehow felt warmed by anyway. Director Voss allowed herself a rare, small smile, nodding toward Callum with something close to gratitude. I simply stood there, staring at the machine we had saved, my mind slowly working through everything that had just happened. Later, once the station had been fully secured and the research inside preserved, I found Callum sitting alone near a viewport, looking out at the dim red star that had almost claimed us all. I approached quietly and sat beside him, still holding the wrench he had first shown me hours earlier. I laughed at this, I said, turning the tool over in my hands. I thought it was primitive, beneath real engineering. Most people do, first time they see it, he said, not unkindly. My people built machines that could create almost anything from nothing, I continued. But we forgot how to fix things that were already broken. We built for a world that never bends, never cracks, never fails in ways we did not predict. Today, the world bent, and we had nothing ready for that. Callum was quiet for a moment, watching the star pulse slowly in the distance. We never had the luxury of a perfect world, he said finally. Everything we build breaks eventually. Storms, mistakes, bad luck, all of it. So we learned to work with what's actually in front of us, not just what we wish was there. That is a different kind of engineering, I said. Not worse. Different. Maybe the best kind is a mix of both, he said, glancing at me. Your precision, our stubbornness. I looked down at the wrench again, feeling its weight, its simple, honest shape. There was no code inside it, no complex system waiting to fail under pressure. It was exactly what it appeared to be, and it did exactly what it promised. Will you teach me to use this properly? I asked. Callum smiled, the same tired, patient smile from hours earlier, though now it carried something warmer within it. Yeah, he said, I think I will. Outside the viewport, the dim red star continued its slow, endless pulse, indifferent to everything that had almost happened beneath its light. Inside the station, humans and Kryvaen moved together through the corridors, checking systems, repairing smaller damages, sharing quiet words of relief. The outpost had survived, not because of perfect technology, and not because of raw human effort alone, but because two very different ways of solving problems had finally been allowed to meet. I kept the wrench with me from that day forward, carried in a small pouch at my side, a strange and simple reminder of the lesson I had learned far from home. Perfection could build wonders, but it could not always survive contact with a broken, unpredictable universe. Sometimes, what a crisis truly needed was not the most advanced tool available, but the willingness to bend, adapt, and work with hands as much as with knowledge. I never laughed at human tools again,